Don't just watch cowboy. Something bit me between the legs. Suck out the venom before it spreads. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The sky had turned rust-colored by the time Michael Cree finished chopping wood behind the crane. It had been a long, dry, and hot day like all the others of the season, but something about the stillness of the air made him uneasy. He stood with his hands on his hips, the door of his work, his eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. Not for anyone in particular, he just didn't like surprises. Michael was 40. He didn't look it from a distance, but up close, the wrinkles on his face told the story. Years as a trainer of cavalry horses had given him scars under his shirt, a bad knee that flared up when the weather was bad, and a way of reading people that didn't rely on their words. People in town didn't ask him not much. He wasn't rude, just quiet. After the flood that had swept away his wife and son 3 years earlier, he'd moved to this rugged hideaway between two mesas, rebuilt it with his own hands, and kept himself apart from anything that didn't need his help. That evening, he was walking toward the house with a jump when movement caught his eye near the dry trail that ran past the watering hole. A low figure on the ground. Too small to be a man, too slow to ride. He stopped dead in his tracks. His fingers tightened on the jump handle. The sun was low, making details hard to see, but he could tell someone was crawling. He moved closer, his boots crunching on the hard-packed earth. At 30 meters, he saw her clearly. Peed-in, her dress torn at the back and shoulders, one hand trailing behind her as if it weren't functioning properly. Her legs were covered in dust, her knees were raw and scraped, and blood blackened the side of her thigh. She didn't look up until he was 5 paces away. Her voice came out barely. "Don't look between my legs, cowboy. Something bit me." Michael didn't answer. He put down the jump, knelt slowly beside her, his eyes narrowing on the wound. Her thigh was already swollen near the top, just below the line of her pants. 2 puncture marks were deep, surrounded by inflamed red flesh, a snake bite close to the femoral artery. He didn't ask what kind of snake. It didn't matter. He untied the knife from his belt. Her hand rose weakly toward him. "I told you not to. I'm not here to hurt you," he said. That was all. No comfort, no smile. He slid the blade gently through the fabric, exposing the wound. Death seemed recent, maybe less than an hour. Her leg was shaking. He bent down, inhaled hard once, spat into the dirt, then more blood mixed with saliva. He didn't speak. His fingers dug into the ground. She fainted. Michael cut a clean strip from the hem of her dress, tied it tightly over the wound, then slid her arms were beneath her. She was lighter than she should have been. Her head fell back against her chest. She was already burning. Inside, he acted quickly, clearing the cot and setting her down. His cabin was a single room with a workbench, a bunk in the corner, and shelves filled with jars and tools. He went to the kettle, poured hot water into a mug, added crushed pow root from a pouch in the drawer, and stirred with a spoon until the powder dissolved. He gently lifted her head, supported her neck with one hand, and brought the mug to her lips. She gagged once and then swallowed. As she lay there, breathing faintly, he looked at her more closely. Late 20s, perhaps very angular features mixed with something else, possibly Mexican. Her face was sunburnt, her skin cracked, her lips blistered, her wrists bruised, as were her ankles. Summer knew. Michael checked his pot. Weak but present. He went to his workbench, took out a worn cloth, cleaned the blade he had used, then returned to the cot, and he sat down on the crate beside her. He didn't take off his boots, just leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, watching his chest rise and fall. She had fled, that much was clear. He didn't know from whom or how far away, but the bite hadn't killed him yet. She had a chance. He would give her that. The room was silent, except for the creaking of the roof boards as they cooled in the evening air. Michael didn't try to understand why she was there. It didn't matter. She needed help. That was enough. For now, he would keep watch. For now, he would stay. He didn't plan on sleeping. Not tonight. The room smelled faintly of burning wood and iron. Maya opened her eyes slowly, her eyelids stuck together with dried sweat. Her throat ached. Her head throbbed. She didn't move right away. The ceiling above her was made of rough wooden planks. One of them was split cleanly. It creaked when the wind pushed against the exterior walls. For a second, she couldn't remember where she was. Her body ached too much to tell. Then it all came back in a flash. The bushes tearing at her skin, the rattle in the grass, the cowboy's boots near her face, the pressure on her leg, his hands. Not rough, not greedy, just efficient, focused. Then darkness again. She tried to sit up. The pain shot through her thigh and shivered. A voice spoke before she could fall back. Watch out. He was standing close, stirring a kettle over a flame that looked like it had been burning all night. The man didn't look at her yet. His back was broad. His shirt sleeves rolled just above his elbows, the side of his jaw lined with a few days' growth of stubble. His hands moved confidently. No rushing. He lifted the lid, poured into a mug, set it down. You're in my house. You arrived with a snakebite, almost too late. She licked her lips, but they cracked. Her voice cracked too. You looked. I did. He finally turned around. It had to be done. He moved closer and offered her the cup. His fingers accidentally brushed against hers. He didn't react. Neither did she. The warmth of the drink hit her stomach like a stone, not because it hurt, but because it meant she was alive. How long? She asked. From the twilight, he pulled up a chair, sat opposite the bed, not close enough to invade her, but not far enough away to seem frightening. The fever broke before dawn. You've passed the worst. She moved again, more slowly this time. The fabric of her dress had been pinned to her thigh with a button from her shirt. The cut neatly wrapped in a cloth that looked boiled and knotted by someone who had done this before. Her jaw tightened. Who are you? Michael Krill, she nodded once. Maya, they didn't shake hands. He didn't ask where she was from, and she didn't offer. But she noticed his eyes, his skin, the bruises on his wrists, the half-healed cuts along his collar. He didn't flinch, nor did he pity her. Instead, he stood again, went to the shelf, took down a small tin of ointment and placed it next to the cup for the swelling. The ointment is mother's, but it works. Maya took it. Her fingers trembled. She hated it. Hated showing weakness, especially after what she'd run from. But Michael didn't emphasize this. He was already back by the hair, stirring something in a pan that smelled faintly of beans and salted lars. She looked around the room more carefully. Everything was in its place. Nails lined up on a wooden board, a neatly coiled rope, sharp and oiled tools, a folded cloth shelf, a rifle in the corner, unlocked but not on display either. This wasn't a pepper shack or a lonely manhole. It was inhabited but clean, useful. You live alone, Ilcha nods. She looked at him again. His face didn't reveal much. There was something settled in his eyes, like someone who had done peace with the idea of being left alone. Maya rubbed her arm. You're not going to ask me where I'm from? He shook his head. You'll tell me when you're ready. No man had ever answered her like that. No man had ever waited. They sat in silence again. The kind who didn't push or pull, just existed. When she finished her drink, he took the cup and rinsed it without a word. She lay down slowly, the pain easing but not gone. Her body still didn't feel like her own, but it was there and safe for now. Outside, a horse snorted in the coral. Somewhere, a hinge creaked in the breeze. Michael opened the door halfway, paused for a long moment, just staring at the empty path. Maya turned her face toward the wall and finally slept without fear. Morning arrived warm and clear, with no clouds to break the rising sun. Cicadas chirped from the mesquite trees just beyond the fence. Dust sizzled on the rocks behind the grotto. Inside the cabin, the fur had gone cold, and the bed was empty. Michael noticed it the second he returned with a load of firewood. He didn't call her name, just stopped by the door, his eyes drifting to the folded blanket at the foot of the cot, then to the small tin of ointment lying untouched beside it. The cabin was silent. He put down the wood, wiped his hands on his trousers, and went back out, scanning the yard. She was near the coral, gripping the fence with both hands. Her left leg sagged and trembled as she tried to shift her weight onto it. The makeshift bandage had loosened. Her breaths were short, her forehead damp, her jaw clenched in pain. He said nothing. Maya glanced over and then looked away just as quickly. She didn't want help. That much was clear. Michael walked past her toward the door. He opened it, grabbed a leather strap from the ankle board, and went back out with it wrapped in one hand. She looked at him without speaking. He knelt beside her and tightened the bandage with a clean cloth and a new strap, pulling it until. He held her thigh firmly. She didn't flinch. You'll reopen it if you don't slow down, he said, standing up. I don't like lying down, she replied. Her voice was dry but firm. You don't have to lie down, but you have to go slowly. She nodded once. No posturing, just the truth. They stayed like that for a while, two people unaccustomed to talking. Two people too tired to pretend. Do you work with horses? She asked, her eyes on the coral. First the cavalry, then private work. Now just my own. She looked at the heels in the paddock, a large black horse with deep eyes and a notched ear. What's his name? He doesn't have one. That's not good, she said. He looks like he deserves one. Michael gave the weakest of smiles, then looked toward the house. Are you hungry? She didn't answer, simply turned and followed him. Inside, she moved more slowly. Her leg dragged a little, but she didn't complain. She sat down on the crate, near the table. Both hands rested on her knees as if she were holding something fragile that might tip over. Michael served 2 plates. Fried eggs, a thin strip of bacon, dry cornbread. She ate quickly but not desperately, measured, focused like someone who had already known the end and learned not to appear hungry. When she finished, she settled down, rubbing her thumb along the edge of the plate in a dull husk. I'm from north of here, she said finally. A camp in the hills, a small group of men who wouldn't give names. Michael didn't move. They kept me after a raid, he continued. Killed the people I was with, took those who were left. His voice didn't tremble, but his fingers pressed harder against her skin. I waited until the youngest got drunk and wandered off. Then I ran. I didn't think I'd make it. You did, Michael said. Maya studied his face. Do you believe in luck? No, me neither. The words hung in the air for a second. Then she touched the bandage again, testing the leather strap. It'll hold, she said. I'll start sweeping the Porsche. You don't have to, I know. She stood up. He didn't stop her outside. The broom was leaning against the wall. She took it in both hands and began from the edge inward, pushing slowly and evenly, her weight shifting as she found a rhythm. Michael sat on the step of the Porsche with an unlit cup of coffee, silent as always. She didn't ask for a story. He didn't offer one. But for the first time in years, the sound of bristles on wood didn't sound like a sound. It sounded like someone who intended to stay. Late in the afternoon, the wind came down from the rocks brisk enough to blow sand in your eyes. The kind of wind that would test a man's patience if he let it. Michael didn't. He was by the fence with pliers in one hand, a roll of wire thrown over his shoulder, his hat pulled low, and his mouth in a line. A rail had come loose during the night. Maybe coyotes were snooping around. He didn't care why. He didn't care, just to fix it. He heard her before he saw her, her boots treading lightly on the dry earth. She wasn't wearing that torn dress anymore. She'd taken one of her old work shirts from the hook by the door, rolled the sleeves up to her elbows, and tied a length of string around her waist to hold it in place. Her legs were bare to the knees. The bruises hadn't faded, but she no longer walked like someone who was hiding. Do you have another pair of gloves? She asked, stopping near the fence post. He nodded toward the saddlebag by the stump. She approached, took them out, and then slowly put them on. Her hands were smaller than his, but she didn't complain about the fit. Just got to work, holding the rail firmly while he twisted the wire. They didn't speak. The wind howled on the ridge behind them. A hawk circled overhead once and then disappeared to the west. The sun was setting, and the shadows were lengthening. Maya was focused, not distracted. She watched as he bent the wire, she watched how he used his knee for leverage, studied his grip. She didn't ask questions. She learned by doing. When the job was done, she wiped her palms and looked along the line. How many more posts need fixing? 4, maybe 5. I can help. Michael didn't nod, didn't argue. He simply walked to the next break. They finished at sunset. As they walked back inside, the ground turned orange beneath their boots. The scent of warm earth mingled with the distant sage. It was quiet but not empty. She walked beside him, not behind him. Inside the cabin, she went to town, checked the fire, and added wood without being asked. He watched her from the table, how she was doing, how her shoulders weren't hunched over like they had been that first night. She didn't sit down until the kettle started boiling, then poured water over some dried beans and slowly put the lid on. I have my father to fix the pens, she said before the steep. Michael drank from his cup. We didn't have much, just a patch of land. But I knew every plank, every knot of rope, every tool had its place. Her voice wasn't nostalgic, just factual as if she were reading from a list. He listened without moving, letting her speak. They killed him first, she added. They didn't even ask anything. Just walked in, gun drawn, took what they saw and left the rest to burn. Michael stared at the grain of the table, his jaw still. He didn't interrupt. I don't expect this place to fix me, he said matter-of-factly. I just needed somewhere he wouldn't find me. "You have it," he replied. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask her to. Later that evening, after supper, she folded the borrowed shirt before going to bed and laid it beside the cot. He glanced once, saw the gesture, and said nothing. But the next morning she found another shirt neatly folded on the bench. Washed, smaller. No note just there. That night Maya slept both nights. With his hands flat against the blanket, Michael stepped out, leaned against the Porsche's pillar, and stayed there until the moon rose above the ridge. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but for once, the waiting didn't feel heavy. By mid-morning, the heat had already settled over the valley as if it had no intention of leaving. The wind pressed down instead of blowing, thick with dust and dry seeds. Michael had taken the wagon up to the North Ridge for supplies. 2 sacks of grain, blocks of salt, and spare nails from a rancher who owed him a favor. It was the first time he'd left the property since bringing Maya over. He hadn't told her when he'd be back. He just hitched up the team, checked the wheel hubs, and left with a nod. Maya watched him go from the Porsche, a hot cup of coffee in her hands. She didn't wave. He hadn't asked for one. The cabin felt strange without him, not dangerous, just unusual. The silence inside wasn't the same as the silence that filled the camps, outside the law. It carried no threat or judgment. It didn't wait to break. It simply existed, steady, like the mill before where the planks wore down beneath her feet. She spent a while cleaning the fur area, folding the bedding, and wiping the lantern glass. Each task took longer than it should have. Her legs still ached, though she didn't limp as much as before. She didn't sit down to move her hands to think clearly. By noon, the chores were over. She stood at the gate, peering at the fence. The horses hadn't been fed yet. She crossed the yard to the hayloft, pausing to check the latch was intact. Inside, the smell of alfal and leather was strong. Particles of dust floated in narrow beams of light, filtering through cracks in the wood. The black stallion in the corral approached cautiously, its ears twitching. It was tall, broad-shouldered, slender along the flank, marked by battles like the man who owned it. His tail lashed out once, but he didn't back away when she approached. Maya filled the trough slowly, measuredly. No sudden movements. She'd handled animals before, but not since the stiffness of it, not since the days when she had a name worthy of being called. The stallion moved forward once the water touched the trough, chewing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. She stayed outside the bars, her hands gripping the post. "You need a name," she said in a low voice. The stallion's ear prickled. She turned to the other, smaller pen, containing a mare with a white stripe across her face. Gentle, probably one used for traveling. She was thin and hadn't been brushed in days. Maya picked up a shower hair brush and entered the gate slowly. She kept her hands visible. It wasn't safe. The mare backed away once, then froze, uncertain. Maya remained still, letting the air settle. After a minute, she reached out. The brush touched the skin and the mare exhaled. The movement calmed something within her. The silence between each, the dust rising from the coat, the way the horse leaned lightly. Everything looked clean, honest. She worked until the coat shone. Then she filled the 2 water rings, checked the fence, and cleaned the old hay near the corner. When she turned toward the cabin, she saw Michael's wagon rolling along the ridge in the distance. She stood there, leaning her elbow on the fence post. She didn't want to be inside when he arrived. She wanted him to see her here. The useful wagon crunched along the trail, its wheels biting into the gravel. He didn't speed up when he saw her, just slowed to a steady roll and stopped the team beside the post. He got out, untied the bags, and placed them on the Porsche. "You didn't have to do all that," he said without looking at her. "I know," she replied, "but I did." He glanced at the mare's clean coat, then at the hay bin. "Good work," he said. She nodded. They carried the bags together, side by side. No words were exchanged until that the last one fell into place against the wall. "I used to feed 12 before sunrise," she said, wiping the dust from her hands. Michael turned to her. "Was this your family's ranch?" She nodded. "Before it burned." Neither of them moved for a long second. Then Michael reached into the back of the wagon, pulled out a can of extinguished coffee wrapped in brown paper, and handed it to her. "Better coffee than I've got." She took it without question. He sat on the Porsche as